Hello, friends. Welcome to LeggLife podcast. My name is Adam.
My name is Sherry.
Sherry Beth, what episode is this?
66.
And this weekend is a big one.
Yep.
Sherry Beth, what's going on this weekend?
It's Father's Day.
It is Father's Day.
Mm-hmm.
And our friend, did Jordy recommend this?
I think so, yeah.
I think so. You guys will remember that we did a Mother's Day podcast where we talked about just kind of lessons that we've learned from our mothers, from mothers, like mother-type figures in our lives. And so Jordy was like, why don't you do one for dads as well?
I was like, that's brilliant.
It's a great idea.
Yep.
And I just want to say something from the beginning. I think that dads a lot of times get a really bad rap in society. Like, the way that they're perceived in TV shows and movies, a lot of times is this, like, bumbling idiot. Who,
right.
You know what I mean? It's like every Father's Day card is, like, fart jokes, beer, you know what I mean? Like, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And sometimes I just think that in today's world, fathers get a bad rap. And I think that we've been fortunate. I think of like even friends of ours that we've seen that have just been great, great dads.
Yeah.
And so this episode was a no-brainer for us. It just makes so much sense. So Sherry Beth, let's start out. For the Mother's Day episode, we limited it to one. We're going to do the same Father's Day.
Yep.
Just like one either attribute of you or one thing that you think you got from your father.
Yep.
First of all, tell us about your dad. Who is your dad? What did he do?
My dad, his name is Jerry, which was really super fun growing up because we had Sherry and Jerry.
Did you ever call him like J-Dog?
Didn't. Nope.
No?
Sure didn't.
All right. Well, it's not too late.
So there was a lot of times growing up where my mom would yell for Sherry or yell for Jerry, and we would both answer, and so we got the middle name treatment a lot. So it was Sherry Beth or Jerry Dean, which was how we differentiated between us.
So funny.
Because, when you're yelling through a house, it's like Sherry and Jerry sound very, very similar.
Totally.
So that was always fun.
Also, it doesn't necessarily surprise me that you and your dad were the ones who got yelled at. Like, when I think of your family, it's like, oh, no, that kind of makes sense.
Well, yeah, you're not wrong. So, my dad was a teacher for a big chunk of my life. He taught high school, like history and government and that kind of stuff. And then he became an athletic director. I think, like, my freshman year of high school or so, and he did that until he retired.
I remember always being so impressed because, again, I wasn't raised in Indiana, but as somebody who was raised outside of Indiana sports are like, that's like a pinnacle, especially basketball.
Yep.
And I just remember thinking it was so cool that this girl that I liked, Dad, was an Indiana athletic director. And I just remember thinking that was like, whoa, that's such a cool job.
Yeah. So my dad is just one of those guys who's just like athletic.
Yeah.
Like no matter what sport he's playing, he's excelling.
Kind of like you.
Well, I was just going to say he forgot to pass any of those athleticism genes to any of his children. My sister and brother both did like play sports, like they ran track and that kind of stuff in high school, but like it just completely skipped me. Like there's not one single cell in my body that is athletic.
Hold on. Wait a second. You told me that you played softball.
Okay.
Right?
In like middle school, and I was the one picking the flowers out in like left field.
It's my favorite.
Because I was bored to tears. I hated it.
Totally.
Yeah. So, and actually, I think I think I said that he was an athletic director until he retired, which I think was not actually true. I think he did actually go back to teaching. But yeah. I'm confused about my father's, which I shouldn't be.
He's my dad.
But he's also been retired for several years now. So
totally. So it's not like it just happened.
Right. No.
So when you think about either an attribute or something that you have, a life lesson, whatever it is, about Jerry, what do you think of? Like, where did your mind immediately go?
His playful side.
Yeah.
I got that from my dad. And honestly, like, I feel like you and like very few people actually get to see my playful side. Like it doesn't come out real often.
Yeah.
But when it does show up, it's 100% Jerry Amstutz.
I can very much see that. Like very much see that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like my goofiness is from my dad.
What did that look like growing up? Like, where...
He was always the one to like wrestle with us on the floor and like throw us around the room. Like, and he would tuck us in at night.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom would get so mad because she would come in and she would sing to us, and she'd pray with us, and she'd read us stories, and then like tuck us in and
so
go
you're
to
like
bed.
winding down.
We're winding down. We're like almost asleep, and then Dad would come in and tuck us in.
Yeah, and what did that mean?
And that meant, oh gosh, there was always like a few things that he would do every night. He would fluff our pillows.
Yep.
Except our heads were still on the pillows.
Excellent.
He would. What I forget what he called it, but it was like shaking out or like tucking in the blankets, but it was literally like throwing them off the bed and like back onto us in like a pile. And he would this is gross. He would just check for our toe jam, which just meant he was tickling our feet. And so like he would get us like rolling and laughing and screaming, and my mom would come back in and be like, for real, like
that's so
they were almost asleep. And that was like honestly like through high school, like he would come in and tuck us in.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is like the first few times that I saw you do this in a grocery store, I was like, oh dear God, I have married my father.
What's that?
Like you like what's the word I'm looking for? Like with the carts, like weaving all throughout the aisles with the carts, totally. And like walking and then just like stopping so that I run into you.
Yep, I love doing that.
Gosh. Yeah, like that's all my dad. Like it's like I grew up with that. I was just like, oh no.
I have to deal with this the rest of my life. I've already dealt with it in my life.
Oh man.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yep. So yeah, definitely my playful side is from my daddy.
And I want to talk about something you said, because it's really true. There's not a lot of people who get to see the playful side of you.
Yeah, I would say like I'm mostly serious, but like when it comes out, it's
hilarious. Like it is so unbelievably funny because it's so rare, and I almost have to stop every time. And I'm like, where in the heck did that come from?
It came from Jerry Amstead.
That's exactly right. It's exactly where it came from. So thanks, Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
I have to deal with it now. Appreciate that, buddy. So my dad, Terry Legg. I'm going to talk in a minute about kind of the thing that I think of when I think of my dad, the thing that he's passed on to me that's just sort of front and center. I'll tell you a little bit about him. My dad grew up, most of my life, he did like construction work, primarily drywall, sheetrock. He would do like brush textures, finish painting, that kind of stuff. And one of the things I remember growing up, and I grew up on a lot of job sites with my dad. I would go to work with him, and I would be able to bring like toys. And I remember he was always so like gracious with me, because we'd go into these houses and they're still being built, right? They're not finished. And I remember one time at a home here in Anchorage, I brought my little remote control car and I drove it, and it accidentally went into one of the vents of the house because there weren't vent covers on it, and we obviously couldn't get it back. So like there's a house in Anchorage that just has like a remote control car from like the late 80s or early 90s, just like still in the vent. And I just remember that kind of stuff. My dad said there was one house we were working on that so I'd bring tennis balls with me because I loved like sports kind of stuff. And I'd sit there and I would throw a tennis ball against a wall for like hours and just like try to catch it. And, you know, like I'd throw it against the wall and I'd pretend like I was an outfielder catching the final out of the World Series.
You weren't the one picking the flowers?
Yeah, no, you and I are different.
No?
You and I are different. Well. And my dad said that at the end of the day, we were packing up to leave, and the light hit the wall just right, and all he saw were these like hundreds of little tennis ball dents in the wall that he had to then go back and like fix, like take down the sheetrock, I think, and like put up another piece of sheetrock because I had just spent the last 8 hours throwing a tennis ball against the wall. Sorry, Dad. But that was like my dad. My dad is the kind of guy who it's really interesting now that I think about this, because you talked about your dad was so athletic, but you didn't get that. Mm-hmm. My dad is so handy. He can fix anything and do anything, and I didn't really get that either. Yeah. Right? Like, when something goes wrong at our house, whether it's plumbing or electrical, we call my dad. Like, Dad, help. Like, please help.
He installed our floors.
Yeah, like...
He installed our toilet and sink and the downstairs bathroom.
He's just so good at all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I am so terrible. And it's so weird because, like, again, I was raised on job sites with him, but I just didn't... Gosh, I just didn't get that handyman kind of skill that he has to just know how to do anything.
Yeah.
But when I think about my dad, and I think about, like, something that he's passed on to me, it has to do, and it's so funny because this is, like, such a shared passion of ours. It has to do with, like, commitment and dedication, primarily to, like, a sports team, and the reward of wins when you've experienced so many losses. So my dad, from the very earliest days of my life, was a Seattle Seahawks fan. Now, it has become cool in the last number of years to be a Seahawks fan, right? They won the Super Bowl. They've had really great teams. It's become cool. There's a ton of bandwagon Seahawks fans. My whole life, my dad was a Seattle Seahawks fan. And I watched my dad be a Seattle Seahawks fan through some of the worst years.
Loss after loss.
Loss after terrible season after terrible season after terrible season. My dad was a Seahawks fan. And I just remember, like, the dedication. I don't ever remember him being like, you know what, son? I think it's time to switch teams. Like, this isn't going so well for us. I just remember my dad loving the Seattle Seahawks. And so it was so amazing because when the Seahawks won the Super Bowl, like, we got to watch that together, mm-hmm. right? And some of the biggest games during that run, like, we got to watch those games together. And so I took my dad to Seattle.
I think for his, like, 60th birthday, around there.
Yep. It was the first game after the Seahawks won the Super Bowl. So the first game of the next season, they were playing the Green Bay Packers, and it was like the game where they unveil the Super Bowl banner, right? Mm-hmm. They release the banner. And so I took my dad to the game. We flew to Seattle, and we went. I just had to be there with my dad. Like, mm-hmm. I had to see and experience this with him. And, like, the banner drops, and I look at him. And here's the thing. He and I are both very emotional guys. Like, I get my emotion from him 100%. And I look at my dad, and my dad has his, like, beard painted, like, blue and green, like mm-hmm. Seahawks blue and green. And we both just, like, eyes filled with tears.
Just crying.
Crying like you would not even believe. But the thing that I learned was, like, his dedication through all of the crap made the victory so much sweeter. Right. Like, he didn't jump on as a fan when they were winning, like, playoff games. You know what I mean? Like, he was there through all the seasons when they didn't win at all. And so I just, like, that's something that I think of, because we live in a day today when people, like, will move their allegiance to things mm-hmm. based on current success.
Cancel culture.
Well, no, not cancel culture, but, like...
Well, but, like, they're done with this person or this team, and so they'll just move on to the next shiny...
Yeah, that kind of.
Yeah.
And so you see people, like, jump around and move their allegiance. And I'm like, you know what? I will be a Seattle Seahawks fan for the rest of my life mm-hmm. because of my dad.
No matter what. No
matter what. Because I watched him be a fan no matter what. And so that's such a, 100%. That's it. Still to this day, like, sports is something we connect over a ton. Mm-hmm. We can always... Like,
almost every phone call is, like, about baseball or
football or something. Something sports related.
Something.
Without a doubt. So one of the things that we did in our Mother's Day episode mm-hmm. is we looked at other men in our life who kind of were father figures maybe without actually being our dads.
Yep.
And this was actually kind of interesting, Sherry. And I don't know what to make of this, but here's what I'll say. There really is only one that we kind of agree on.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of guys that have been very influential in our lives.
Yes.
That have spoken into our lives, that have been encouragement to us, but not necessarily in, like, a fatherly way, in the same way that we had lots of women who have been motherly.
Yes. Like, I felt like I almost had to, like, limit my list of women in my life who have been a mother to me in some form. And when we were talking about like men that have been like a father figure to me in some form, and spiritual father or whatever, it was a lot harder to come up with a list, like to come up with a list, let alone having to like limit a list.
And so I have a lot of thoughts on that. I have a lot of thoughts just in general when it comes to fatherhood, some of the things that we're seeing happen in culture, kind of the lack of that. The only thing here's what I want to say. To all of you out there who are good dads, and the ability to be a good dad is more than the ability to simply produce sperm, right?
Correct. It's showing up for your kids.
Yeah.
And if you can show up for your kids, even if you make mistakes, you're a good dad.
Well, and not even showing up for your kids. It's showing up for all of the other young men in, like, your life and the world.
Yeah.
Like, there are a lot of great dads out there who will never have the title of dad. They're just playing the role of dad, right? Yeah. And so, like, to all of those guys, like, thank you. Like, thanks for being that way. But there was one man that really was kind of fatherly to us, and he really played a pretty impactful role in the early days of our marriage, but even, like, still today.
Yeah, still today there's lessons that we know was him. Like, he taught us this.
So before we got married, we went through like pre-marriage counseling, something we encourage everybody to do.
Yeah.
And our mentor couple, we had a mentor couple, and we kind of feel like
we lucked out.
I'm just gonna be honest. I think we had the best mentor couple in the history of the world. Their names were Bert and Levon, and when they started mentoring us, they had been married for,
oh gosh, I want to say they'd been married for 60,
like just over 60 years.
I think so.
Which is crazy.
Yes. Also, just random fun fact, their anniversary was my birthday.
That's right. Their anniversary was your birthday.
Yep.
And so this is a couple who had lots and lots of experience in this. Mm-hmm. And there were some things that we learned, and I learned from Bert, that he never necessarily sat down and taught us. He just showed us.
Yes. I mean, I think that there was like a discussion with like actual words used, mm-hmm. but I think most of it was just watching him.
And it wasn't just during our pre-marriage counseling, because we stayed close to them for years and years after we got married.
Yep.
And so we watched their life. And some of the things that I learned from him was, number one, this is the craziest thing, you guys. Every single day, I don't mean like most days, I don't mean some days, I mean every now and then, I mean literally every single day, he went and had lunch with his wife. Mm-hmm. It didn't matter how busy work was. It didn't matter how busy life was. Every single day, he left the office and he went and he had lunch with his wife.
And they own their own business, and I think that they even said, like, this is what they do. Like, everybody knows from this time to this time, Bert is unavailable because he's having lunch with Levon.
Yeah, it's like, to know Bert is to know his love for his wife.
Yep.
And I just remember being like, this is a dude who has been married for 60 years, and he is still pursuing her so actively and so hard. You know what I mean? Like, he is still making sure that a week doesn't go by that she doesn't know that she is his priority. Mm-hmm.
And that she is loved and cherished.
What a freaking example.
Yeah.
And so, like, that guy, I got to watch be an amazing man. I mean, he was very fatherly to me, for sure, to us as a couple. And so he was the one that kind of really came to our mind the most. But then again, a lot of guys that feel like contemporaries to us, but not necessarily fatherly. It has been fun watching friends become dads, though.
Yes, it has. And I'm going to go back to the fatherly figures for a second. Yeah. And because I realized the way I said it, it kind of meant like it sounded maybe like I didn't have any father figures, but that's not true. I had a wonderful actual father, and I had many of their friends who were like father figures to me, which I fully appreciate, and they did kind of help raise me. But I think when it came to, I feel like, for like spiritual mothers, I think especially, I feel like I've just had a bunch. Yeah. I've had a lot of really wonderful, godly women in my life. And fewer godly men. Not that there weren't none, but there fewer, I think.
You've had a lot of women who have intentionally stepped toward you.
Intentionally invested in me.
Completely.
Yep.
And that's just not... And here's the reality. That's just not something we see guys do as much.
Right.
It's just the reality. We don't see it in culture. We don't see it in the church. We don't see it as much as we do the opposite.
Right. It's there, but it's just not as much.
Yep. Totally.
Yep.
I think of one, when I think of friends that have become dads, so we have one friend who has more energy than almost anybody I've ever met in my life. And I'll never forget going over to their house.
Right after they brought their first baby home.
Right after they brought their first baby home. And we had been friends with them at the time for a number of years.
Long time.
And I don't think I had ever seen him tired. Like, that's the weirdest thing. Like, we had gone camping together. We had done lots of stuff together. I don't think I had ever seen him, like, exhausted.
Right.
And we walked into the house, and he was standing in the kitchen, and they had kind of like a look through. Mm-hmm. And we walked in the back door, and he was standing in the kitchen, and I'll just never forget
his hair standing on end.
Yes, I was like, oh, you look terrible.
You're right.
But it was just so Here's what's weird. It was this combination of exhaustion and such like joy.
Right.
Like, it was this combination. Elation. Yeah. Like I am exhausted and I am elated at the same time.
Right.
And so that's been a ton of fun. And I think we said this when we talked about the Mother's Day episode as well. We're really fortunate that I feel like we have a lot of friends that are just great parents.
Yes, I agree.
You know, like I think of Ben Bacher and the way that, like, watching him with Noble, watching him with Gracie, it's the kind of thing that it's like, like, you kids are lucky to have him as your dad.
Yeah.
I think of Justin Zachman, right? Like, the boys they have and the baby girl they're about to have, it's like, oh, like, you kids won the genetic lottery getting to have him as your dad.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other kids. I mean, I think of, like, even Chris Miller. As we've gotten to know the Millers, one of the things that I see in Chris is like, oh, you're a great dad. Yep. And so when I think of fatherhood and manhood and masculinity and all that kind of stuff, it's easy for me to get really frustrated at the lack in our culture, but I have to be intentional to look for the good. And I think that I'm really fortunate because we have a lot of really good dads in our life.
Yep, I agree. My brother-in-law is one of them.
Your brother-in-law's it.
We talked about my sister in The Mother.
Oh my gosh.
And she's a fantastic mother, and I love watching Eric.
Oh.
Father.
He is a great dad.
Yep.
Like, genuinely such a good dad. And they're also, like, just good parents together.
Yeah, they work really well together.
Without a doubt.
Yep.
Yeah, without a doubt. So, friends, there we go.
Yeah.
Father's Day. You know what I wish I would have done?
What?
Because I'm such a lover of these. I wish I would have prepared like 10 minutes of dad jokes.
Oh gosh.
At the end of this episode. Because I don't know if you guys listening know this. In fact, here's what I want. Over in the comments.
Oh no.
Yes. Oh yes, you mean.
Oh no.
Go over to YouTube, search LeggLife Podcast, find this episode. In the comments, I want you to leave me your best dad joke.
Oh dear God.
Don't oh dear God this.
I have to live with this.
Hold on. You get to live with this. The Lord has blessed you.
Constant dad jokes.
Oh, all of the time.
All the time.
And here's the thing. My memory is, listen, guys, I did some drugs in the days, okay? And so my brain isn't all there. And so I, like, forget some things from time to time. And I feel like I don't hold on to dad jokes. And so I have so many of them that I recite to Sherry, but they're like dust in the wind. It's like, once they're out there, they're gone forever. And I'm so sad.
Until you try to do it again and I answer it for you and you're like, how did you know? I'm like, because you said it to me last week. Okay, we're going to talk for a second about...
what are we going to talk?
About our Missy girl.
Okay.
We don't have kids.
What?
I know. I don't know if you knew this.
Plot twist.
Plot twist.
Plot twist.
We do have a very sweet kitty.
You sure do.
She chose you...
Yeah.
To be her papa.
She sure did.
At the shelter. Like, she was just like, you are my person.
Yeah, so we were, it's funny because I didn't want a cat. The reason we got Missy was I was traveling a ton for work. I was gone all the time. Mm-hmm. And Sherry was like, you know what? You're gone so much. I just want another living being in the house.
Right. And I'm not really a dog person. And we don't have a yard.
Yep.
And so, I just feel like having a dog would be hard, but cats are pretty easy, and I'm much more of a cat person anyway.
Yes, we went to the shelter.
So we went and got a cat.
Went to the shelter, and they had two little kittens. And Missy was the first one where they, let us pull her out and go sit with her. And we brought her over and sat her next to us. And
she was tiny.
Oh, she was itty bitty. Yeah, she's not itty bitty anymore.
She's not itty bitty anymore.
Also, same. And she just instantly,
she was like, "You are my person. I am going home with you. Thank you."
100%. Like, she crawled up on my shoulder. She clung to me. And really her whole life, she's kind of always been mine.
She's always been a daddy's girl. She tolerates me.
I disagree with that.
I think that she loves me, but I think like it's rare. Like if she's snuggling with me and you go lay down on the floor, she's like, "Oh, nope. Snuggle time with Papa."
That's true.
And so, like, she will jump off of me to go snuggle with you.
She will leave you to snuggle with me far more often than she will leave me to snuggle with you.
Right.
Without a doubt.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's the sweetest. She's a good girl.
Yep.
She has made me... I've always been a cat person. I mean, I had cats growing up. My very first cat ever, his name was Mama Cat. I was creative with naming. Don't judge me. But... Stop. But so I've always liked cats, but Missy's the one that made me a cat person. Like, for sure.
Yeah.
Such a good girl.
Yep.
We've always had a special bond.
Yep.
Is Missy getting me anything for Father's Day?
Probably not, no. She didn't get me anything for Mother's Day either.
Ooh, shots fired. So, friends, again, want you to leave a comment over there on YouTube, best dad joke. Because here's the thing, I need more jokes to tell Sherry.
Do you, though?
Yes.
Do you?
Because me Googling dad jokes, I'm almost at the end of Google. I found the end of the internet. Friends, we love you guys so much. Thanks for listening. To all of you who are dads by, whether you're a dad by birth or by choice, thank you. Yeah. We need more guys in culture.
There's a shortage of dads around there.
100%.
Around the world.
And so we need guys who intentionally are stepping into the lives of the next generation and making a difference so that in 20 years when a couple of yahoos sit down to record a Father's Day podcast, they have an entire list of men that intentionally stepped into their lives and invested them. Right? So I hope that we can see that turn around in our culture. Friends, we love you guys, and we'll see you next week on the next LeggLife podcast. Bye.